What is the Orthodox understanding on alcohol consumption?
So, that's a very um, uh, a question that's been out there all the time. We know that people will say, uh, one way or the other, be it right or wrong. And a lot of people when they say, well, you should be able to drink alcohol. They said the Jesus' first miracle was changing water to wine, right? And so that's always the joke about it. But when we look more directly at the issue of drinking alcohol, we know that in the scriptures there's no law or just teaching against it outright, right? That's part of life, and that's part of even our human society. That's been part of it from many years since the people have had, alcoholic drinks, be it wine or beer, or to this day now we have so many other ones, right? The key thing is abuse of it, right? So we know that within our Indian Orthodox Church, because we see the issues that it causes, the abuse of alcohol, we have a strong sense saying that it's best, not to drink, right? Alcohol is very should not be used. And if there's other uh, drinks you can drink that doesn't have alcohol that just as will help you to continue to have a good time or continue to be able to enjoy time spent with one another. But at the same time, we know that many people do it, and so we understand that the proper understanding is always never abusing anything, and specifically things we know that will affect our ability to make good decisions. That's always the key thing. Is me personally that I always when I try to talk to people about, be young and old people about alcohol, is just if we when we lose our ability to know right from wrong, when we lose our ability to know how to pray, and the key thing, the start that I remember being told to me or I've read as well, the moment, when the second coming comes and Jesus comes in his glory, we'll be too drunk to know that he came. We'll be falling asleep to say, I don't know. I was asleep. And so that's what it says, that's where we say that we have to be watchful and vigilant. And so alcohol in itself limits our ability to be watchful and vigilant. And so if there's something that we can, it's a choice that we make. So that if we can make the choice not to do it, so to remain watchful and vigilant, it's better not to do. So it's better to remain that way, right? And so I always tell people, you have to be very mindful. Don't follow the laws of the country that you're in. Particularly in the United States, it's 21 before you should be drinking alcohol. At the same time, don't do something that will cause harm to others. By over drinking or drinking and driving. Those are we know that that has an effect. But even more than that, many families have felt the effect of how alcohol. Uh, Harms the relationship of the family, right? The person who drinks or over drinks or becomes alcoholic becomes it makes we're unable to live with them, but we still love them. So it's a love hate. We love that person, but we can't be with them. We hate the state that they're in, and so how do you stop that is by saying stop drinking, right? Or don't do the thing that's making you become what you don't want to be, right? And so we pray that all people are very conscious and mindful of the state they're in. And I always remember one of the leadership camps many years back that we had our MGOC some leadership camp. One of the speakers was it was a nun that came, and she quoted a quote from one of the church fathers that from the early church. It says, every interaction that we have with somebody either leads them to Christ or leads them away from Christ. Very, very powerful. Every interaction that we have either leads them to Christ or away from Christ. And so that means that reminds us that if we're living a Christian life, more than just preaching Christ to people. That was kind of how the question was, how do we present Christ or preach the gospel? And she was always mindful, it's in everything, in all things, how we respond to people and interact with people will either lead them to Christ or away from Christ. So in that similar vein, alcoholism many times causes us to be not the best Christian, right? And especially if we're too drunk to know the right thing to do, right? And so if it's not leading us and leading people around us to Christ, then we should be very mindful that we should limit or just completely eliminate that from our life so that we're not being a stumbling block, as St. Paul says. Be eating or drinking, whatever it is, don't make it a cause as a stumbling block for our brothers and sisters around us. So, our church has always been, do what's, you can, in a moderation, it can be okay, but being very careful and mindful that, our calling is to be always ever vigilant and watchful to uh, be, able to present and worship Jesus Christ.